Testarossa.
On paper, it's just an update, a facelift with an extra 50 horsepower. But could it be a bit more than a mere refresh?
The Ferrari SF90, I think, was a bit of a forgettable Ferrari as these things go. It, to me, never quite stood out. And I think Ferrari wants to address that with this.
Bearing the famous Testarossa name, it certainly has a lot to live up to. This episode is driven by Hagerty, who, in case you don't know, provide car insurance that's designed by drivers for drivers. So, if you have a special car that you don't drive every day, like one of these perhaps, then take a trip to hagerty.com/Henry. Or pick up the phone, give them a call, and speak to a like-minded enthusiast about a quote.
Wow. The first thing to say about this is that it looks way better, I think, than the SF90. This has real character about it. I'm sure it's going to be polarising in certain parts, this strip down here, these little flicks up in front of the lights there, but overall, it's got real presence.
I think this actually has some of the same big shoulder pad visual impact and intimidating sense of size as the 1980s Testarossa. The headlights, despite being fixed, are also meant to evoke the pop-ups of that car.
And this door, it's amazing, this channel down here that you reach in to open it. It's got drama. And the theatre continues in here. I've been pretty critical of recent Ferrari interiors because I think they've not been the most cohesive or sort of special feeling in some ways, but this is amazing. Obviously everyone's been talking about the return of the proper start-stop button here, but for me the real highlight is this gear selector up here. In the past I felt it's been perhaps a little bit apologetic and sort of, I don't know, just hasn't really sort of captured that open gated manual the way they wanted, but this floating up here, this huge bit of metal, is just wonderful to look at. I love this spar as well, and the sort of the juxtaposition, the contrast between the carbon on this side and the soft Alcantara on that. It's a bit like seeing, I don't know, the sort of the inside of a suit jacket when it's got sort of some bright colour to it. It's a good place to be.
There is a confident main character energy to the 849 Testarossa. It's not beautiful, and I'd avoid those colour-coded Pirelli sidewalls, but if they were casting for a modern Miami Vice, I think this would get the part. Anyway, from thoughts of Florida to the reality of a misty Andalucia.
What a morning up here. A little bit greasy on the roads, but that's actually quite nice just to be able to feel the car, see how it is in different conditions. Super smooth roads, but the few bumps you have found, it deals them really well through town and stuff. You can feel the ride is excellent. When you first start driving in this, as well as the sounds quite good actually. It's quite race car before you expect it to explode into life. Like that. Not quite the big explosion I was perhaps hoping for, but the steering instantly has more weight than perhaps I was expecting, which is really nice. It makes the car feel very confidence-inspiring straight away. It also feels slightly slower in its steering response than some Ferraris, which again just relaxes you into it a little bit. view out, it's perfect. Between those two widely placed arches in front of you, really good sight lines. Love being able to see those intakes in the mirrors, really prominent haunches. The worries I might have had from the looks of the car in terms of how big it seems to be, how sort of intimidating it really is as you walk up to it, actually they all go away instantly as soon as you start driving. Ergonomically as well, this feels like everything is slightly better laid out than some recent Ferraris. The different panels seem to fall to hand easily, you know where everything is. Steering wheel, certainly not as chunky as some other cars, so that feels very nice in hand as well. Paddles, again, a very distinctive Ferrari feel to them. A little bit more weight than others, so it just takes that bit more effort, and then it becomes easier as it engages.
Being a plug-in hybrid like the SF90, there are 3 electric motors, 2 radial flux at the front and 1 axial flux MGUK at the rear.
If you leave the E-Manatino, so that's the only haptics really we've got here, which is along the bottom, if you leave that in hybrid mode and the gearbox in auto, then it feels like it's quite happy to go in and out of hybrid mode sort of fairly sort of quickly. Demonstration there of it, at which point the digital dash, the Ani-Digi rev counter I suppose, goes from yellow when the engine's on to sort of grey-black when it's off, which I think is a really nice touch. It's a very cool visual sort of aide memoire, obviously with the sound as well.
In pure electric mode, the Testarossa is front-wheel drive only, with 161 brake horsepower and a range of 15 miles from the 7.45 kilowatt-hour battery. Useful for pottering through towns or villages. However, it's still internal combustion that is very much the star of the show.
Tucked all the way down there, so low that in fact if you glanced at it you might think there was an engine missing from this engine bay, is the 4-litre V8 with its wonderful red crackling on top of it. And it's all aluminium, appropriately with revised cylinder heads, putting out 819 brake horsepower, 621 pounds-feet of torque, revs to 8,300 RPM, and it has the largest turbochargers fitted to a production road-going Ferrari.
It also now uses recycled aluminium in its castings and has a new intake plenum and a new valve train system. However, for all the drivetrain's 1,036 brake horsepower, it's not going to win any Grammys for its voice on a light throttle or at low revs. Thankfully, things start to improve a bit once you ramp up the commitment levels.
You pop it into manual, still love this here, it's really good. And then up on the E-Manatino, put it into performance, pop it into race with the other Manatino, so lots to do, obviously, but get into that setting, and it all starts to come alive more. Oh. Race also brings with it more aggressive gear shifts, which certainly add something to the soundtrack. Talk about a startled ferret, it is properly quick, but the other impressive thing is just how much traction it's got. Over 1,000 brake horsepower, what feels like pretty short gearing actually, given the acceleration. The response is incredible.
The Testarossa has a dry weight of 1,570 kilos or 3,460 pounds, which is the same as the SF90, despite the engorged turbos and associated extra cooling. In terms of hybrid rivals, it's a decent 200 kilos lighter than the Lamborghini Revuelto and almost 100 kilos lighter than the carbon-tubbed Aston Martin Valhalla. It's certainly not a featherweight, but it's also not lumbering or hesitant in any way.
No sense of turbo lag at all, just massive punch. And brakes which give you a lot of feel on the road.
It's a car that can clearly do the everyday, but only really starts to make sense and bring the tingles when you start to push it. Really push it. Sport isn't enough, it needs race. In other words, we should head for a track, just like some of its ancestors did.
It's 70 years since the Testarossa name was first used in 1956 on the 500 TR. And there are a couple of interesting things about that car, parallels, if you will, with the latest one. For a start, it was an update of the 500 Mondial, not a totally new car. Also, like the latest 849 Testarossa, it wasn't a 12-cylinder. It was a 4-cylinder.
This fabulous car, owned for over 40 years by David Cottingham of DK Engineering, is actually a 500 TRC, the additional letter representing the modifications made to comply with Appendix C in the racing regulations. It wears the colours of a Curie-Francorchamps, and it not only won its class at Le Mans in 1957, but also at the Targa Florio the following year.
And here, in this 2-litre, 180 horsepower engine, we have the reason for the name Testarossa, which I'm sure, as you know, is Italian for red head and refers to these wonderful cam covers.
The 500 TR and TRC were followed by the famous 250 Testarossa, a car that won Le Mans in 1958, 1960 and 1961.
A few years ago, I was lucky enough to actually drive a 250 Testarossa, and it remains one of the greatest experiences of my life. Centre throttle kept things pretty interesting, but the shift from first to second, so mechanical, possibly the best single shift ever. And the sound of that 3-litre Colombo V12, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it.
A Testarossa did actually win Le Mans in 1962 as well, a one-off 330 TRI, the I indicating independent rear suspension. It remains the last front-engine car to win an overall victory at Le Mans. It was then 22 years until the Testarossa name would reappear at the Paris Motor Show, this time as one word rather than two.
So wonderfully redolent of the 1980s, isn't it? On this Testarossa, the red cam covers were fitted to a 4.9-litre flat 12. You can tell that this is an early car because of the single high-level wing mirror, which some owners at the time didn't like, so they fitted a matching one over on the passenger side. You can also tell this is an early car because the star alloys have that single chrome nut in the middle.
The Testarossa got an update in 1991 with a 512 TR, which dropped the engine by 30mm but otherwise stayed much the same. It lasted for 3 more years, and then the Testarossa name was shelved again.
And now back to the present day, and somewhere that I don't think you would have found many of the previous generation Testarossa, circuit Monteblanco. And the ultimate, or certainly most focused version of the latest Testarossa, because this has the Assetto Fiorano pack.
Costing £42,000, or about 10% of the Testarossa's list price, the pack brings most obviously a couple of aerodynamic extras front and rear that put me in mind of the mighty 512S that raced in 1970. You also get the carbon wheels and the option of Pilot Sport Cup 2 or Cup 2R rubber. We've got the former today.
There are some things you notice straight away about the Assetto Fiorano pack, and they're not all to do with performance necessarily. They give a really different feel to this car. So having these seats, which are manually adjustable, and the steering column is manually adjusted as well, it sets the tone. I think it's just that bit more focused, more raw. I don't know, it makes me smile. It makes me think, yeah, this car's very much up for going quickly. The other thing is that they've stripped out quite a bit of sound deadening, so it's 30 kilos lighter overall, and clearly quite a bit of that comes with a lack of sound deadening, so this definitely sounds a bit rawer. This has got a titanium silencer on it as well. Definitely more vocal in here. Still not musical, but just sort of angry. And now we're on track. We've got it in qualifying mode on the E-Manatino, which gives all the performance. And if you use all the performance, it will, well, basically drain the battery until the point of reducing the performance again. And I asked sort of, how long does that last? And they said, well, about sort of four and a half laps around Fiorano. but it's all gauged around the longest track that it would do, which is fairly obviously the Nürburgring. So the idea is that you could use qualifying and you would get maximum performance over a complete lap of the Nordschleife. We've got the Multimatic dampers obviously on this as well, and again I really like them. You've got that extra sense of connection. So the spring rates are the same as the Magnaride dampers are in their race setting, but the damping's just improved.
Now, one option that our car didn't have was mud flaps. This prototype 849 was hanging around in the pit lane for guided laps and was giving real Lancia 037 rally car vibes. Lovely. I imagine, however, mud flaps play merry hell with aerodynamics, and Ferrari has seemingly worked really hard to increase airflow compared to the SF90. There is 30% more air getting to the intercoolers and 70% more cooling going to the rear brakes, while a new underfloor with 3 sets of prettily named cascading vortex generators has apparently increased downforce at the front of the car by 20%.
What does all that add up to? Well, 415 kilos of downforce at 250 kilometres an hour. Almost a kilometre long, this main straight at Monteblanco. Watch the shift lights. Hit the limiter there, look for the braking point, and bang! Immense feel coming into that. So that was about 200 metres, probably could have braked even later, to be honest.
The Testarossa was hitting 180 miles an hour at the end of the straight. For context, that's around 20 miles an hour faster than both the Ferrari 296 GTB and Aston Martin Vantage that I've tested here in the past, which I think shows just what a step up in performance it is. But even more impressive is how this car behaves in the bends.
What I think is absolutely brilliant about this latest generation of hybrid supercars is that, yes, there is an outright speed, and boy is this quick in a straight line. I mean, 2.25 seconds to 62 miles an hour, that'll do. 6.25 to 124, but it's the access to balance that I think is the brilliant thing. So it makes you feel like you can just get the car in that window of using its tyres and being able to play with it and have that feeling of slip but also stability, because the four-wheel drive system is so quick-witted, so it behaves like a rear-wheel drive car, so it has the lovely natural balance most of the time until it needs that front end. And then it brings it in absolutely instantly. So unlike old-fashioned kind of four-wheel drive systems, it really acts so instantly and therefore intuitively.
All the pieces of software and hardware are now brought together by PHEV, not the boy band who keep on moving, but the Ferrari Integrated Vehicle Estimator, which was introduced on the F80. It creates a digital twin that predicts the car's behaviour in terms of speed and yaw, and therefore allows all the other systems to react more quickly. Intrinsically, I don't like the idea of a machine second-guessing me, but thankfully the result feels very natural and unobtrusive from behind the wheel.
Oh, this is the spec that I would want my Testarossa in. All that pent-up energy that you felt on the road, now it can really be unleashed. You know it's good when you're changing up halfway through a slide. The 849 Testarossa certainly feels to me more than just a mere update of the SF90. And it's certainly not a disgrace to its famous name. To that extent, I think it feels like a sort of combination of these two, to the extent that it is very definitely a road car, but also one that really needs a track to complete the picture. And talking of completing the picture, it is the other piece in a Ferrari jigsaw that I sort of didn't really know was missing until now. You see, whereas Lamborghini has the Revuelto at the top of its tree, Ferrari has kind of split its pinnacle in two. On one side, you've got the naturally aspirated rear-wheel drive Super GT that is the Dodici Cilindri. And now you have the more performance-orientated, more technologically focused 849 Testarossa. They complement each other. They are the automotive yin to each other's yang.